This is this is October, Spookytober, anime 2023. And this represents the last two animes I've excluded out of the past six, five or six. Apparently for October, as well as for the month before October and the month before that, um, there wasn't a lot of spooky stuff, except for, I believe, back in July. But that was all the way in July. So nothing really exemplary shined for October. And the anime that did come out in October um, for spooky season with regards to scares weren't scary. So the closest thing I could get with regards to anything scary was something with gore. Actually, yeah, something with gore. Um, and somewhat scary. Now, I was going to put Uzumaki in here, but I couldn't find Uzumaki um, within my playlist. And I was going to put Maniac here, also made by the same guy. Turns out Maniac isn't scary at all, even though people praise that those short stories that are attached to that whole spooky expression of Japanese ghost stories, as well as horror. Um, I didn't find it horrifying in the slightest. It was more annoying and somewhat disturbing. And I've always stated this before. If it's disturbing or dark, it's not the same as scary. Because scary is related to fear more than the bleakness and depression of darkness. That's a different type of horror. It has nothing to do with fear. It's more like these are dark images I'm watching. So it's bleak, and bleak type of horror um, gives you a sense of dread, but not a sense of fear. It's a different type of horror. Um, yeah, uh, or maybe a sense, maybe a percentage or a certain amount of fear, but it's not the fear that if you were cornered by a lion type of fear. That's no. So, with that said, um, my name is Maggie. I do anime, I do manga, I do uh, gamings as well. And I put these all on this channel because there's no reason to create another channel, even though YouTube want me to do so, because that's just for them. I'm not interested in doing anything for them. And because I don't do this a lot anyway, so there's no need to create a big anime channel since I don't do anime a lot. That'll be a different story. So, the first anime I'm going to start out with is this one. And remove this pointer from here. And this anime is called Make My Day. And the second anime on this list is called Zom 100. Now, Zom 100 did come out October 2023, and it's a good horror, and it's related to zombies, so it's perfect for Spookytober. Um, but Make My Day didn't come out in October. It came out in the early months. So I couldn't find one or two or even three or four that was somewhat spooky. They all kind of fall into the same line, fall into the same line as Make My Day did. So what made Make My Day stand out above them is because it was a series and the story was interesting all the way through, and the tension was there, and it wasn't something like a short like Maniac was. Various different film shorts. It was a complete series that you could watch from beginning to middle to end in a binge if you wanted to. It's very much like Starship Troopers meets Aliens. And something else. It's a combination. Oh yeah, Blue Gender. Blue Gender is considered a horror, sci-fi horror. So Make My Day is sci-fi horror. and I wanted something that's related to Spookytober and horror, related to sci-fi, and I wanted something that was related to horror, but didn't have anything to do with sci-fi in the distant future. I wanted two type of horrors, one that's somewhat like Aliens, um, Ridley Scott's Aliens, and one that was very much like um, George Romero, Dawn of the Dead, or Night of the Living Dead. And I want those two type of horrors to be very different and presented in the Spookytober. So, without further ado, um, this is the sci-fi one, and the other type of horror is Psalm 100, which is also happens to be a comedy at the same time. So you get two types of anime for the price of one. One that's both considered action. Actually, two that are both considered action. One that is sci-fi and drama, if you don't want comedy, and the other one that is comedy and drama, if you don't want seriousness and stakes. You want something more lighthearted, but at the same time you want spookiness. So both were considered. So this is the first one is Make My Day, and Make My Day is not better than Psalm 100. I'll tell you that right now. So if you want to skip Make My Day and go straight to Psalm 100, that's the one I would suggest you watch first. If you want something more like Starship Troopers meets Blue Gender, this is the one you will watch. So the first scene you see here is in Make My Day is a ship, and this is the rundown of this video, and this video will tell you everything with regards to each scene I'm going to show. This scene represents one of the police ship of the future, and they're coming to land at a mining facility. This mining facility houses criminals who are placed to do labor for a company. Which company, the anime does not say. Moving forward from that, where are we? Okay. Moving forward from that, we get to meet the anime style of this anime. And this is 3D type anime. So it's not your typical run-of-the-mill anime that's you will see all the time. This is very low budget, very not invested a lot within the anime style. There's not a lot of emphasis on the need to put emphasis with making the 3D anime style look good, because it doesn't. What's good about this anime is the story, not how characters look with regards to this anime. I have a slight cold. So moving forward from that, this anime style isn't the best, but it's not about the anime style. It's about the story. Because if you were just going according to the anime style, then this anime would be a fail. But it's the story and the characters and the voice acting that sells this anime more than anything. The story and the voice acting to sell the characters of the anime style. And on the ship are our main protagonist right here, and his name is Jim, or that's his short name, the AKA name. His short name for James Merrill, and he's the main protagonist of this story. And James is a security for these prisoners who are in orange, because they either commit some type of crime against the company, either killing someone or hijacking or something, or whatever it is, it doesn't say. And they're supposed to work at this mining facility on this planet, which, strangely enough, the workers here, the police, or the guards, they live on this planet as well. So this is a colonized planet with people who live on it in various different areas on the planet. It's not just this is the planet that everyone's sent to do labor. This planet has two sections. One, that of a colonized group of people, various colonies on this group, spread out throughout the lands on this planet. And then there's a far distance, like I don't know how many kilometers, maybe 13, 14, or 15 kilometers away at a far distant location, a huge mining plateau where mining is done away from civilian life. That said, moving on to the next, we get a little backstory here. Him remembering, deciding to join up with those who are going to um, find work for him, regards for him paying for his rent and to help out his father, who's living in residential area, apartment complex of this colony. He's an artist, but he realizes artwork does not pay the bills, so he decides to get a primary job, like most artists do anyway. Strangely enough, the work he's doing is the total opposite of the type of work he wants to do in life, where one is very strict and very rigid and very follow rules and regulations. It's very systematic, and other his art life is very non or organized and automatic and systematic, but requires equal labor. One based on systematic labor and how to do things systematically. One based on non-labor and non-systematic, but the amount of hours he spent is equal to that. So that's his dilemma. Moving on from that, as part of his backstory, before he joined the crew to be a guard for these miners at this facility, you get to meet the two characters. First, you meet the secondary characters at the beginning after the ship comes down. You meet your protagonist here, and then you meet the secondary characters of the story. And the secondary characters basically fuel the story more than the protagonist does. If it wasn't for the secondary characters, I believe the story would have been a fail. They are the lead and the primary fuel to make this anime, make my day, successful, I believe, more than anything. If it wasn't for the strength of the secondary characters, the primary characters would have fallen short. So they are very much I wouldn't say the bread and butter of the story, but they're very much a part of the bread and butter of the story. If not, they're one of the focal points necessary for the primary protagonist to develop into who he is. If it wasn't for them, he wouldn't make the decisions he's making. For instance, this is one of the secondary characters, but he's not really. He's more like a tertiary character. And this is a secondary character, but not really. She's also a tertiary character. So it's not really necessary for me to say their names. So I won't, because things don't go very well for them. Moving forward from that, we do get, however, see very important secondary characters pivotal towards James' life: his father and Marnie. Marnie is essential for James' life because Marnie is a girl he knew when he was very young, when he was a child. They grew up, she was younger than him. He was just maybe about 2 years older than her. And eventually she got pregnant by some dude in order to find a way to help her family to get off the planet that they're on. This is a snowy planet. This is a colonized planet, but it is not a very good planet for living and to have a life on because of labor and the conditions of the planet itself. So she's very much this colony that they live on is very much a kind of like a ghetto in space, a space ghetto, and she's trying to get out of that ghetto lifestyle of this place in space. And it's not like typical ghetto. You have gang members, you have homeless people and stuff. There's not really any of that. There's no on this planet. There's no time for people to be homeless. Everyone has to work, otherwise the freezing cold will kill them. So yeah, and gang can't really exist here either. I'm pretty sure they can, but there's no need for them because company is like this authoritarian dictator over this colony, and everyone labors in relations to the company itself. And those who don't want to listen or obey rules, they end up becoming prisoners, or they're not allowed to come onto the planet at all. So moving forward from that, that being the case, we get to go to this next section. And in this next section, we see our boy James Miro go into this room and told by his superiors to go into this room with other people as well, other security personnel, to do cleanup. Apparently, something on the planet killed a lot of the prisoners who were mining there. So you have a lot of like body bags, but in this case, there are no body bags. They're just people covered with a brown covering over their bodies, not to show how gruesome they got killed. But something killed them. James don't know what the hell is going on. It's like his first day at work. But I don't believe it's his first day at work. I believe this is his first day at work at the mining facility, not as a guard with regards to his duties. Now, also keep in mind, he doesn't really want to do his job. It's part of what he has to do to help his grandfather and to help Marnie in order to get off the planet. Because that's Marnie's objective, that's James' objective, and that's part of his need in order to not live in a cold world. Moving on from that, we get to the next scene. And in this next scene, we see another secondary character. And this secondary character, right over here, is our antagonist of the story. I should point out there are two antagonists of this story. Actually, more. Like, there are three antagonists of the story. You have the main antagonist of the story, and that main antagonist of this story is the enemy, the nightmare, the horror that awaits them. And this horror is called the Swarm. That's the main antagonist of the story. The secondary main antagonist, or the secondary antagonist of the story, is the company. Why is the company the secondary antagonist? Or, no, correction, there are two main antagonists of this story. The Swarm is one, and the company is the next. Why I say this? Because if it wasn't for the company, a lot of people would not die. If it wasn't for the company, a lot of propaganda would not have been placed. If it wasn't for the company, a lot of risk factors could have been eliminated and then void this anime from the very get-go. And if it wasn't for the company, a lot of people who died towards the end of the anime probably would not have died as well. So it's very much like a Weyland Yutani thing going on here, where the true villain of the story is the company itself. But not really, because the true villain of the story are the aliens. So in Alien, in the movie Ridley Scott Alien, or in James Cameron version of Aliens, or even the Starship Troopers, the antagonist, the main antagonist, is the alien. Even though everyone knows the shadows that the one of the main antagonists of the story in the Alien is the company itself. They're just the antagonists in the shadows, and that's what the company is. They are a main antagonist, but they are main antagonists in the shadows. They're not the forefront threat here. They're just a threat overall that's shown in the shadows. So the third antagonist, which is the secondary antagonist, is very much this gentleman right here. He's called, what was his name? I had it in my phone. Let me see. I wrote it down. Is it Beck? I think his name was Commander Beck or something like that. Well, I'll move on from that. No, no, I think it's Commander Beck or Commander Pat or something like that. So this guy is the main bad guy with regards to James himself. He's not the overall bad guy of the story with regards to what's happening from beginning, middle, and end. He's just the bad guy in relations to James itself. He's the person that gets in James' way all the time. He's not the villain of the story, the ultimate villain of the story. He's just the sub villain of the story, the antagonist that pushes James from left to right, front and back. And he's kind of an annoying nuisance. And he's basically James' commander. And he's one of the reasons why a lot of shit happens down the road. So moving on from that, after they go and investigate into the tunnels to see what happened to the miners and why they got killed off, because they don't know how all that stuff happened to all the miners. So when they go to investigate, they needed a team. James joined that team to see what happening. Joins this his prick commander, and eventually he gets pulled from a wire on his exosuit into one of the tunnels, and he falls into a tunnel and finds one of the prisoners passed out and knocked out on the ground in a pit in one of the tunnels. That's full with a lot of dead bodies and gross stuff and all this other stuff. So this guy is also a secondary character of the story. Um, and he's one of the selling points of the story. In fact, if it wasn't for him, I believe the half from the beginning to the halfway point of the story of Make My Day would not have been as interesting as it was. It needed something to fuel it in order to get it past the halfway point to make it more interesting. So you're seeing the story from the point of view of the guard, and then now with the introduction of this guy, you're seeing the story for the introduction of the prisoner itself. So he simply wants to survive. James simply wants to survive, and they need to work with each other to escape this place from this supposed monster. So let me just, since it's hard for me to remember every single anime character that ever existed and the names of all these characters, and one of the reasons why I write things down is because I just don't remember names straight off the bat. Some I do, others I do not. So for him, I believe his name was Miller, but what was his last name? That's the thing. It has a first name and a last name. Oh yeah, now I remember. This gentleman, the antagonist, the secondary antagonist, his name is Captain Bark. Now I remember. And this gentleman, if I remember carefully, secondary, is Walter. Yes, that's his name. His name is Walter. So here it is. I wrote it down. I finally found it. Okay. I wrote down the main villain of the story. The company is basically the typical Whalen Yutani company. And why they send people to this planet is to mine sig ores. Sig ores is the main resource with regards to fueling everything from exosuits to um, robocasts, which are robots that do manual labor. To their sig depot, a huge way station, kind of like an airport or something like that, or a military frontier post that's mostly mechanized to many of their mech gears. So sig ores is an essential component towards why they're mining on this planet, and it's important for every one of the gears for which the company use, probably back home as well. So this planet is full of sig ores. So that's one of the main reasons why this colony has decided to settle on this planet, and why there's a depot set here, and why there's a mining facility here. And it's, I think I also wrote, yeah, and the company is aware that there are creatures on this planet. They just don't tell anyone. So that's what I have for the company. Why the company is one of the main villains of the story. Now the story doesn't come out straight out and tell you this, but it basically reveals these things along the way. So moving on from that, we see Walter passed out on here, and we get to finally see an image of one of the swarm. Now the swarm doesn't have a name. These creatures aren't given a name. They're just called the swarm. Kind of like when you watch the movie Alien for the first time. I mentioned this before. Um, Ridley Scott's Alien was never given a name when that film came out. In fact, even when the second film came out, James Cameron Aliens came out, the creature still wasn't given a name. Or by that time, they have already identified it to have a name. But the general public never knew the name of the aliens. It was always referred to as an alien, all the way up to the 90s, early 90s, I believe 89, 90, something like that, 91. It was called an alien. It wasn't until the late 90s that it was, I believe it was given the term xenomorph, either mid 90s or late 90s. The word xenomorph became something popular throughout most people who watch sci-fi shows. But when it came out, the first film came out in the early 80s, and the second film came, or yeah, first one came out in the early 80s, and the second film came out in the late 80s. It was always called Aliens. Xenomorphs didn't exist then in those films. And the same thing is happening here. This thing doesn't have a name. It's called the Swarm. Now, I'm pretty sure there are probably lore online that identify the name of this creature, or the people who created this anime has a name for this creature, but it was never mentioned inside of the anime itself while I was watching it. So moving on from that, we then see the tertiary characters, the captain and the woman, the guard. They both come to rescue James and Walter, the prisoner, out of the pit. Unfortunately for them, things didn't go their way, and they died gruesome deaths. And as you can see here, Walter and James escaped, and their bodies are all bloodied up from whatever horrific horror shows happened to both of those characters. And then moving on from there, we get to see James and Walter hightail it out of there, running for the hills at Mach speed. Got into a vehicle, took off in the tractor, um, couldn't escape, and then one of the guard vehicles from the depot showed up, very much like um, the drop ship from Aliens. Almost looked just like it as well. Shows up to the party, launch a couple of missiles straight out from the side. Its Gatling guns just shred a lot of the creatures. A lot of them go down, but apparently these creatures are combustible from the inside. The gas on the inside of them, once they're blown up from the inside, explode outwards. The gas in the air goes up into the air, and uh, I guess the Gatling guns shredding capabilities, or the heat from the Gatling gun, caught fire due to the gas or the heat from the Gatling gun. The ship explodes, it goes down, assuming the guys in there are all dead. And then we get this nice little interesting scene where the swarm, are rightfully called so, the swarm, that it's not just one of them, it's many of them. These things are very much a threat, a major threat, and they multiply, which is also another threat. And they're very interested in these people, but mostly they're interested within the machines, what's within the machines specifically. Eventually, James discovered that the creatures themselves, the swarm, aren't typically interested in flesh beings. They're not really interested in flesh beings in the slightest. They're interested in the sig ores. Apparently, the blue sig ores, bluish greenish sig ores, are, how do I put it? They're like sugar cubes or like energon crystals for transformers. It's an essential component towards the swarm's existence. They eat it because it's part of it. I guess it helps them to create more of themselves, or helps them to grow, or helps them to mature, or helps them to survive. There's no real definition to the reason why sig ores is something that's essential for their existence, but they feed on sig ores possibly to mature, possibly to grow, and possibly to develop and transform. So that's what I'm assuming. That sig ores is simply a thing that they need so they could survive, so they could evolve. And it's very much like food for them, whereas anything else isn't food for them. It's like a human being needs food to survive, food and water to survive. And the same thing goes for these creatures. And they're not going to eat metal, and they're not going to eat wood, and they're not going to eat um, what else? Plastic. But if the food or the meat or uh, the apples or oranges were attached to metal or attached to plastic, they would consume the plastic and everything just to get around it so they could get the fruit itself or the food itself or the meat itself, and then they would spit out the plastic or the metal. And that's what these creatures do when they consume people or eat people or destroy things. They simply spit out what's remaining of the human being or the creature or the metal, because they're not interested in people, but they're interested in the things that are inside of the people or inside of the things that the people are using. And once James discovers this, he realized that because they use exosuit, because they use robocast, because they use different vehicles that are necessary, that are fueled by the sig ores, he then realized that the sig ores is the key to the destruction of these creatures. That the sig ores inside, once ignited, set off a spark and killed them. So, um, actually, I'm not 100% sure about that either. What I am sure of is inside these creatures is gassy. They're gassy. And the gas inside their bodies is combustible. So if you were to fire a flare or to throw a Molotov cocktail inside of them, they will blow up from the inside. Shooting them doesn't work. Like the bullets or heat from the bullets or lasers or that stuff doesn't work. It has to be something that's of a certain heat amount or fire. It has to be something that's a condensed heat amount. It can't be something that's small heat. It has to be something that sets off or ignites the fumes inside these creatures in order for them to die. So once James realized this, he decides to level these creatures and use this knowledge against them. He goes back to his home, to where his father was, only to discover that his father was being consumed by one of these creatures, but he's only being consumed because his legs don't work anymore, so he needs metal legs in order to work. And the metal legs are powered by sig ores. And so the creature tries to consume his father, and his father, knowing that he won't survive this, gave this little funny face to his son, saying that this is the end for me, but go and save yourself. And he ends up falling into this huge fiery pit with the creature, and they both die. And that's how his father died. Now, I'm not 100% sure that this is his father, because based on how old James is and based on how old this gentleman is, he seems more like a grandfather than a father. But The anime never says that this is his grandfather. The anime says that this is his father. But I'm still not 100% sure about. I'll have to go back. But I believe this is his father. So his father falls into this fiery pit. The story ends there for him. One secondary character is gone. James then move on to trying to protect Marnie and the baby that Marnie is trying to protect as well as father was trying to protect Marnie because these creatures, the swarm, invaded the colony itself. Once all these swarm creatures were woken by the miners, um, the few that escaped went to look for more sig ores, and they traveled all the way miles to this colony and start wreaking havoc on the colony. And eventually they got to his James' father, and they were about to get to Marnie. Unfortunately, I don't think Marnie had any type of sig inside of her whatsoever at all. So they couldn't get to her because she was covered by this little plastic stuff that protected her from any type of physical harm or physical danger. Like if she was to fall, this plastic orb around her would absorb the impact. So Marnie meets Walter. Walter and James help Marnie to escape. Um, James eventually comes in contact with Captain Bark again. Captain Bark kicks his ass because James says, I'm not interested in being part of a soldier of this unit anymore because it's apparent that the company doesn't give a shit about us. And the company doesn't care about the workers or the employees on the planet. Um, that the whole planet is now a compromise. The objective is to get off the planet because the swarm is too big for him or for anyone to control. So to be a good little soldier and do your job doesn't apply anymore because there's no reason for him to do the job for which he didn't want to do it to begin with. He only did it because he needed money. He didn't do it because he actually gave a shit about the job. Unfortunately, this doesn't fly with Bart because once you do a job, you're supposed to do it, especially if you sign a contract for it. Of course, James don't see it that way. He sees his father's dead. He sees Marty's mother and her other siblings are dead. And he sees his town in disarray, and the planet has now been compromised by these things. So the reason he had for doing his job to get money to help his father to get well is now gone, and to help Marnie and her family get off the planet is also gone. So the only thing left now is Marnie herself. So he's decided now that he doesn't need the military anymore or his guard job anymore because all he needs to do is just to have a regular job to help Marnie now. And they need to get off the planet, for which the guards and nobody's going to help them. So he decides to not be part of the military anymore. That doesn't fly with Bart. Bart kicks his ass. Unfortunately for them, while Bart is kicking his ass and then put him handcuffs on him, one of the swarm creatures come in, destroy the facility, and we finally get to learn that Mr. Walter here, so James Walter, or Haymes Walter, I don't know why I call him James Walter, Haymes Walter, killed someone. Now, the anime doesn't emphasize who he killed and why he killed him. Maybe in a future story they'll emphasize the reason why, but he was a prisoner because of this. Moving forward from that, James didn't notice, so he confronted Walter later on in the story with regards to this. It was first degree. Could have been defense thing, could have been offense thing. Who knows? This guy could probably be a real bad guy or a good guy, but regardless, Walter helped him to survive. Otherwise, he would have been dead in that pit before, and he helped Marnie as well. So there's a lot to unpack with regards to the story of Walter. That's why I say Walter is one of the more essential secondary characters that's necessary towards um, James becoming more of the person he is, seeing the bigger picture rather than the obvious conclusion: this person is a bad guy, that person's a good guy. So moving forward from that, he gets James get a radio comm, Walter get a radio comm, and a doctor called Doctor Hansen, female doctor, gets a call. She's the doctor of the depot facility, um, and they're told by the deputy commissioner that everyone's getting off the planet. You have to get to your lifeboat and get the hell out because the company has now abandoned the planet, or at least they want to contain the planet, and they're willing to screw over whoever they're willing to screw over in order to do so. Knowing this, Dr. Hansen and our second in command, this guy, his name is Roberts, assistant Dr. Roberts, and Dr. Hansen over here, um, explained to James that while you were busy trying to think of saving Marnie and saving Walter and saving your father, most people already went towards where the lifeboat is. So you can't save everyone. Roberts then tells James that the only reason why Dr. Hansen decided to help Marnie and 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 James and Walter is that she needed someone to help her get towards where her lifeboat was. She couldn't do it by herself due to her injury. Um, so that's that. James realized it's more like every man for himself, but in the end, this turns out not to be entirely the truth. This story is not just a story about every man for himself in a bleak and dire situation of this horror show, of these things just consuming people and destroying property and stuff. Um, there's more of a heart to the story than anything. It's not just about James maturing, but it's more about how people could come together in a dire situation and find a sense of humanity um, in circumstances that where you wouldn't find humanity in, where you find people turn against each other in a heartbeat. And it is present here that people started turning against each other, but it's also present that they started to find their way back to being human to each other. So James get this reflection of his father when his father was young and when he was a boy, and his mother as well when she was young and she was alive. And he's remembering when he was a boy, nothing but a little child before he grew up, and when he was happy. And then he helped to assist to bringing Marnie's child into the world. So by him remembering being a father, or his father being fatherly to him and his mother being motherly to him, he's finally decided at this point of knowing how he was treated, how his father took care of him in his hour of need, in his hour of happiness. He realized he needs to be there for Marnie's child to be happy, to have a sense of happiness, to have a sense of hope. So he's taken what he's learned from his father and he's now applying it onto Marnie and Marnie's kid to be the father to this child, even though the father is not present. So it's a very beautiful moment in this horror anime of all things, this sci-fi horror anime, a very interesting approach to horror anime and a very strange turn because you wouldn't find stuff like this in horror anime. You would typically find stuff like this in romance story or drama stories, not in a horror anime. But this feels very much um, like a situation that was needed to be told, especially from the point of view of Marnie. And I'm very glad that this was something that was expressed within this anime because it fueled and made the anime more alive by doing so. Moving on from that, after the baby is born, They all decide to get the hell off the planet. We finally get to see the propaganda woman, who was the propaganda from the very beginning, to tell the guards to do their work and tell the workers to do the prisoners to do their work. And then James finally meet her and says, "Do you know the type of shit that you put a lot of people through with your bullshit propaganda?" She's basically saying she's just a face and a name, a representative of the company, and she's no more than a tool used to get the job done. And an example of this is that she's been abandoned by the company to stay on this planet, left to die. And then Captain Bark basically says, "Yeah, so is everyone else." So Captain Bark is trying to comfort her, realizing that the company doesn't give a shit about any of them. And Bark finally gets this realization himself that what he's been doing this whole time is defending a company that doesn't care that he lives or dies. And once he realized the propaganda woman tells him this, he realized everything he's been believing based on the propaganda and based on what he was told to do with his job is now completely been crushed, because they're willing to abandon one of their facial representative of a spokeswoman for their job on the planet. So his evolution is a very small one in comparison to James and Marnie, but it is an evolution nonetheless for Captain Bart. Just like Walter has an evolution, each one of these characters, secondary and primary characters, antagonists, they all have a small amount of evolution throughout the story. James, obviously, more than everyone else, but each of these characters, their evolution seems very much logical, rational, and it makes sense for the situation they're in. I don't feel, however, that Captain Bark is someone that I could actually say that he's truly sorry for the things he's done. I don't believe any of that shit. I believe he's an asshole, and the anime keeps him as an asshole from the beginning to the middle to the end by having James here keep him in line all the way to the very end, saying that I'm working with you because I have to. I don't have to like you, but we just need to do this in order to survive together. So James and Walter never make Captain Bar feel like he's one of the crew anymore. They just make him feel like, okay, you're just here to be here now. You're a prick who followed the rules of the job and was willing to kill us in order to do so. So we're just cooperating with you right now because we have to. It's sad that you just took this long to realize that you were being used. So that said, moving forward from that, we then get to see James and Captain Bark on the roof now, using laser rifles, because I guess the heat from the laser rifles is um, hot enough to shred through the swarm and as well ignite the fuels or fumes within their body. So as I said before, that maybe lasers couldn't do it. I completely forgot this part. Lasers can do it because the heat from the lasers are intense enough and powerful enough to ignite the fumes inside their bodies. Once it shred them from the insides, the heat from the lasers, as long as it's constant, ignite the fumes from the inside the creature's body and they explode. Moving on from that, you get to see situations where crew members starts to like Robert start to go crazy. Hansen starts to go crazy because they figure they're about to die. You see people start turning against each other, and eventually Marnie is about to fall to her death because one of the robocast machines, which are very much like walking at 209s, but are kind of like medics as well as repair drones, maintenance drones, and stuff, um, was about to kill her. So she was about to fall to her death due to Roberts initiating a command. And then, unfortunately for Roberts, he doesn't understand that not all robocasts were programmed the same way, and the robocast that James had was very much different from the robocast that were typically he's in control of, even though the command code is all the same for all robocasts, because Casper, which is the name of James's robocast, has been with him from thick to thin, from beginning to ending. And these robocasts individually is strange. I'm not sure about how Casper is specifically, but it's very strange. Robocasts are kind of artificial intelligence, has the kind of artificial intelligence. I'm not sure if they're sentient beings, but I know that they have a sort of artificial intelligence within them. They're not completely robotic like Ed 219 from Robocop. They have a sort of artificial intelligence in them, a sense of awareness. This is seen when Casper turned against another robot who was about to try to kill Marnie, and they end up fighting each other, which is a very interesting scene. I didn't expect this as well throughout the anime. I thought Casper was either going to turn against everyone and become a robot and can't fight his program, or he was going to listen to reason and turn and save them. But I didn't foresee a robot on robot fight. I was just thinking it was just going to destroy this robot, not a full on like fist to fisticuff robot on robot fisticuffs. It was very strange, but I didn't see that coming either. Moving on from that, we then learned that the swarm is an appropriate name to describe what these things are. They're very. This is very much the definition of the word swarm. Um, a swarm is not just a crowd of tons of these things, like a hive swarm. No, this is more like a swarm by the definition of the word swarm. This is more like a beehive swarm. Nah, not even. This is more like a sea of ants swarm. Um, and they're all creatures, gigantic creatures, and well, to a certain degree, gigantic, and they're all coming towards the facility. So everyone on this planet is unsafe. But a simple fact that these things are like a sea of ants. No one on this planet is safe. No one. No colony, no nothing. The whole planet is being evacuated. I'm assuming other colonial locations have been evacuated, other facilities have been evacuated, and this is one of the last facilities to be evacuated. So James and the others decide to peace out, get off the planet, and finally at the command depot, they are able to do so by hitching a ride on one of their mass driver gears. Now, the mass driver is a booster to Robocast and other mech machines. Um, but the mass driver will also power their ship as well, because the mass driver, that's what it does. At the SIG depot, the mass driver is use a vast amount of SIG ores in order to power certain machines, and they needed the mass driver in order to power their ship to get the hell off the planet. So by doing so, they're finally able to get the hell off the planet, power their machine, and escape the swarm. Not until, or should I say, the moment they did that, they took off. In their final moments, taking off, a gigantic kaiju type worm pops out of the ground. I don't know what this is about. I don't know why this gigantic kaiju type basically what's the equivalent to this exogorth. I think that's the name. The exogorth from, I think that's his name, the exogorth from Star Wars. This thing is like the size of the exogorth from Star Wars. It's bigger than a building. It's may actually be bigger than Godzilla. So kaiju is probably a nice little name to call it, but it's probably bigger than a kaiju. So this giant worm mouth come out the ground, very much Dune-like, and it basically eats all the little swarms. It destroys the huge tower of the Sig Depot, but it eat all the little swarm creatures, and it's never defined what this giant worm is either. It's just assumed that this planet has more than just one type of threat at the last moment. So past the 90% marker, you get to see that there's even a bigger threat, or should I say past the 95% marker, you get to see that there's even a bigger threat on this planet than the small swarm. So everyone escapes. This is one of the last scenes. They take off in a rocket ship, or in their life ship, into space. They all escape. The final scene shows the baby um, about to go. I think there was something inside of the baby. It was caught choking on something. Marnie couldn't figure out what it was. They thought it was dying. The doc decided to give it CPR. Roberts decided to intervene and says, "Let me do it. You're doing it the wrong way. It's not its breath. Breathing is not the issue. It's that it has something stuck within its throat." Turns out the baby had small amounts of sig ores inside of its belly, or inside of its throat. How that got there, I don't know. Um, I guess a child being a child sees sig ores, small little glowing green things, and decides to throw it in his mouth. The typical behavior of a child. And here at this last moment, the last scene of this anime, after Marnie and James have finally decided to like become a couple um, and help to raise the baby. We see the baby in the last scene is shown to eat another sig ores, like floating in the air. It's either, I'm not sure if sig ores can float, or what this is. It looks like sig ores, floating sig ores, um, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just water. But I guess it's a representation of life, human life's curiosity for abnormal things within their sight range, things that they see, and their need to explore will always either cause them harm or um, put them in situations that would bring harm to them, or make them want to explore and make their life either fulfilled or, I guess, in some ways uh, meaningful. So this scene with the baby can be either one or two things. Uh, Curiosity kills the cat, or essentials of human evolution is to be inquisitive and to explore things. But as we've seen, um, the child choked on the sig ores because it ate it. And in the scene, the child went and tried to do the same thing again before it cut to black. So it's like the need to want to uh, explore things that you don't understand is part of the reason why a lot of situations happen, um, with regards to science and in fiction stories as well. And this is true, especially in science fiction. Exploration and the need to do things that aren't necessarily healthy for you are some of the main problems that cause you harm. So I like how they use the child as a representation of humans' curiosity, but at the same time, um, humans' downfall due to the need for being curious, the innocence of exploration, but at the same time, the dangers that comes with it. So that's it for Make My Day. I was very interested in this anime past the second episode. Why? Because it had more meat in the second to third episode. By the fourth episode, I was sold because there was more going on in this anime than just simply horror. It was drama. It was um, it was lessons to learn. It was lessons to be learned. It was good storytelling and good acting with regards to characters. The anime wasn't that great, but it wasn't about the anime. It was about what the story was, what was being told, how the horror was presented, how the story of the horror was presented, um, what type of horror it was, what type of reasons for why the creatures behaved the way they did. Everything was explained to in a way that made sense, and this anime was very much a sci-fi horror homage to other sci-fi horror that are also homages to other sci-fi horror. So this was a very good homage sci-fi horror, and it really sucks that I have a cold here, but I'm trying to get through this and say what I have to say. But this is a very good anime. It's not the best sci-fi horror anime, but it was the best consistent, and I was very invested in knowing what was going to happen next. That's that's the making of a good story. When you're invested in something and you want to know what's going to happen next. When you don't want to put down the pen when you're writing and you're writing a good story, or when you don't want to put down the remote when you're watching something good and you decide to skip to see what's going on in the news, but you realize if you miss out on anything within the story, you might have missed something very important, pivotal in the story. So this was very much uh, a Netflix anime um, that you could binge and you could always come back to. But it was one of those ones that you could binge and come back to, but you don't really want to, um, because you know if something hooked you within either episode one, two, or three, it will pull you in for the next couple of episodes, and you won't want to stop watching it until you know what it was. Now, if you're not into sci-fi, anime horror in the science fiction realm, the next one I would go towards is Zom 100, and this is my number one on October Spookytober anime list. In fact, if there were other horror animes that did make it on this list for October, I believe Zom 100 would still beat them out, even if they were scary. If they were completely Michael Myers scary, or if they were, Ju-on scary, I think I would still put this at the top as my number one. Why? Because very few anime can get comedy right with regards to horror. Horror is very hard to do when you add comedy to it. Now, some people say, no, it's easy, you just make something silly. No. A lot of horror anime gets the comedy wrong, and it becomes over top, it becomes silly, and it becomes cringy. And um, a lot of zombie movies get it wrong as well, because they think, well, if you shoot up a lot of zombie heads and exploding, and you have fun cutting zombies up, that's all fun. It's just gore, but the comedy isn't really selling it. It's just the gore fun is selling it. This anime knows how to do the comedy right for the comedy aspect of the horror and how to do the zombie part well enough for the zombie part of the series itself. So the most thing I respect with regards to this above other horror anime is that it knows how to sell a story before the shit hits the fan. And it knows how to sell a story even after the shit hits the fan. And it knows how to sell a story while the shit is hitting the fan. So this is a good thing about this anime. It sold a good beginning. It sold a good middle, and it sold a good ending. I don't know what the overall ending to the series will be, but based on the last episodes I watched, that's my ending. Based on that. So, and another thing too, the anime for this Zom 100 is pretty good. I didn't think it was going to be good, but it turns out the anime is pretty decent, and I believe it's very reminiscent of My Hero Academia. I didn't look up who was the director of this or who were the writers of this, but this feels very much like the people who wrote My Hero Academia. The characters look like they're straight out of My Hero Academia, so I wouldn't be surprised if the people who made My Hero Academia made this. So, that said, this is Zom 100. This is to me, the best anime that came out in October with relations to horror and with relations to comedy and with relations to a sense of balance with regards to horror. It's not scary to the point that you can't make someone underage watch it. As long as you have parental guardians, you can make someone underage watch this because it's not that type of dark humor. It's not that type of dark uh, uh, bleakness. It's not that type of scary fear that would make you stay up at night. It leans towards the comedy to water down the darkness of the anime, and that's essential towards the success of this anime as well. How it used that comedy to water down what would be a very bleak Walking Dead type anime. The humor of the story is very spot on, and it works very well with regards to what Zom 100 is. And just to point the fact out, this was a manga before it became an anime, and it was a live action film, I believe, before it even became an anime. So it was both a manga first, then it became the live action next, and then it became an anime afterwards. So the anime adaptation, I believe, was the last of the two, or of the three. So, first scene we see here is a guy running away from a bunch of zombies. Now, the anime, this is why I say this is a beautiful and probably one of the best directed animes with regards to horror in October, if not the best. Um, the anime doesn't tell you that what you're seeing is what's happening for real. You're just assuming that this is happening for real. That a guy's being chased and tons of zombies are chasing after him. And then you get this good, clean, and beautiful overhead shot, which I love with regards to this anime. A lot of the distant angles, low angles, high angles, side angles, with regards to characters and regards to locations, were done very well in this anime. Another reason why this is my number one. Um, the next scene you see is it cut from that scene of that guy running from zombies to someone watching the guy running from zombies on his computer monitor. Turns out this is our protagonist of the story. And his name is Akira Tendo. And Akira Tendo says to the guy running away from the zombies he sees on the monitor, um, wow, you're living in a living hell. Gee, I would feel sorry for you if my life wasn't worse than yours. It's like, You think you're living in a level of hell. Um, Wait till you see my life. What you're speaking about, or I believe he's talking to the monitor, or in his mind, he's talking to the monitor. He says, I believe your idea of hell will be my idea of heaven. So he's basically telling the guy on his screen that can't communicate back with him that you're crying and running away from zombies. To him, the work and the job he does in real life is worse than being chased after zombies trying to rip you apart. That's how terrible his job is. That he would consider zombies chasing after him, wanting to eat him alive, to be heaven in comparison to his job. So his job is this terrible that flesh-eating zombies would be considered heaven in comparison to that. So the anime already starts off with the comedy being awesome because everyone knows that there are jobs out there that you work so many hours every single day that it feels like not only are you being exploited, but you feel like you're a slave and that you're about to turn into a living, walking zombie by just work alone. Not an infection, not anything else. By just working alone, you would eventually die on the job and become a zombie, or you become a robotic type human flesh zombie based on simply labor itself. So after eating his food, he passes out in his extremely dirty room because he doesn't even have time to clean his room. That's how much he's been working. Um, he hasn't come home from work in like 2 days. He was at the office for a full 2 days. And after 2 days have passed, he finally got home. And instead of taking out the garbage or cleaning up his place, he eventually wrapped everything up in garbage bags, ate food, and passed out on the ground after watching something on his computer to give him a sense of life outside of his job. And apparently, the buildup of all his trash and all the bottles and the food is simply a representation that as soon as he goes to sleep after coming from work, after 2 days long at work, he has to go back to work, which means when will this guy clean his room? Now, this looks like more than 2 days worth of garbage. In fact, this looks like more than a week's worth of garbage, which means he's been working more than just 4 or 5 days. He's probably been working full 6 days. And on his seventh day, he was probably so tired he bypassed the seventh day and forgot to do cleaning. But guess what? He had to go back to work. So yeah, this is a guy who working for an exploitive company, a scam company, and he then gives a backstory with regards to what it is that he did and how he got into the situation, which is very interesting, and it's the beginning of the true comedy of this anime. Um, Before the whole zombie stuff happens, he was very bright-eyed. He very interested in his job in an ad agency. He wanted to make great ads for his company after he graduated from his college. I believe the name of his college was Kuryu K University. That was the name of his university. Let me look that up. I wrote it down specifically. Yeah, Akira Tendo, graduate of K University. Yeah, so he graduated from K University along with his friend called Kendo, who's also graduated from K University. Akira himself used to be on the rugby team when he was in college, and eventually, after graduating, he decided to get into advertising, while his friend got into real estate development. So they both led separate lives. He came to this company in the hopes of making a name for himself. Turned out that's not the case. Turned out he became a living zombie himself, but for his job. So the whole zombie thing that he saw on that screen, with regards to the guy running away, was simply a metaphor, or in this case, like a physical, visual analogy for what he would eventually become on the job. Also, another good thing about this anime, why I have it as my number one, the the representation of the story using the zombies to metaphorically tell the audience exactly how Akira is feeling and what Akira is in real life is good. When the guy is running from the zombies, it's like Akira trying to run from the life that he has now, the zombie life that's trying to cling to him, and he's trying to escape the zombie life that's trying to cling to him, of the company. So the zombies in the the video that he was watching are simply a representation of the exploitive company, and the various different ones are represent individuals of that company who are now robots or labor workers who have no souls. So I love how they use the zombies to represent this. So after his little introduction with regards to the crew and regards to his team in the company, after they took him out to have a good meal at a local restaurant or something, instead of a hard day's work of working many hours at work, guess what happens? They all whip out the company badge and say, "Okay, boys, enough dilly dallying. It's back to work time." So, yeah, it's not explained how many hours this guy has been at work, but we can assume that he's either been to work anywhere from 10 to 12 hours at his job. And that's just anywhere from 8, 10, or 12 hours on the job. That's the standard I'm giving it. So he assumes after probably a 10 or 12-hour workday that he was going to go home. No, they just went right back to work again. So it's at this point the comedy really starts to kick in very hard. I started to laugh my ass off that this anime didn't waste any time with throwing the comedy in. In the very first episode, the comedy was in your face. And it's weird that the comedy doesn't have anything to do. Well, it's not really weird, but it's interesting that the comedy of the anime has nothing to do with killing zombies at all, or having fun killing zombies, or the behavior of people who are trying to survive in zombie apocalypse. It's funny that the comedy of this anime has to do with the thing that's worse than the zombies, and it's the scam company, the exploitive company. Just like the previous anime, Make My Day, the bad guy, the true bad guy of the anime is the company itself. And the same goes here. It's very strange. The company is the real bad guy of the story, even though the zombie apocalypse seems more like a bigger deal in this one in comparison to Make My Day. Because obviously the main antagonists of the story are the zombies, but once again, hidden in the shadows, the main antagonist, the secondary main antagonist, is the company itself. And how I know this is, or should I say, how the anime explains this and shows that this company is probably the main bad guy of the series and probably will be the main bad guy coming towards the end of the series, is that the very first episode shows that they're so terrible, they're equal to the level of zombies, the threat of zombies. This guy is telling this other gentleman while they're sleeping in sleeping bags at work under their desk that how many hours have you worked this week doing overtime? This guy said, I've clocked in 150 hours of overtime. That's additional times towards their average work hours.
This guy who looks like he is literally about to die in any moment. I swear, he looked like he's about to just pass out or become unconscious from lack of any type of vitamins or health medications or food. Um, Tells the other guy, listen, that's nothing. I come back to me when you clock in 200 overtime hours added on to our regular standard work hours. So these dudes basically spend their life at the office. They probably haven't gone home for days. Um, this guy probably gone home probably once in an entire week, Mr. 200 overtime hours. So K is, or should I say Akira, um, has probably gone home maybe 2 or 3 times the week, and these dudes probably gone home probably once in the entire week, um, or even worse, they've probably gone home probably like twice a month, and they've probably spent more than a week at the office itself. They have sleeping bags, they have food, they order out the whole 9 yards. So this anime starts to crank up the fun, and the fun doesn't even start. I mean, this fun of the zombie apocalypse is not even the true fun of this anime. The fun of this anime is being liberated from work, which is the most hilarious thing of all times because that's how every human being feels when they're working ridiculous hours. So here's another thing. We have this hot babe here, and the hot babe basically looks like she gets more than enough sleep, that she's more than taken care of because she's also being exploited. But she's been taken care of nicely because she's a hot babe while everyone's dying of health conditions. Because, well, the boss is basically using her to get sexual pleasure from her. Um, so, as long as she keeps her nose clean and does what the boss says, she could have as much sleep as she want, eat as much food as she want, and don't have to ever come to work worrying about doing a lot of work. That's all. And we see this because the anime shows her being taken advantage of in the boss's office. What's weird about this anime is that Akira had a crush on this girl, knowing full well that this girl, Hotori, I believe her name was Miss Hotori, is clearly banging the boss. So why that this is the only thing that threw me off of this anime that I gave it a negative point for. Why would you still have a crush on someone who's clearly banging the boss and you know she's clearly banging the boss? But like it doesn't make sense. That's the only thing I knocked off from this anime that I took away from it. I knocked several points off from Make My Day that things didn't make sense, but for this I only took 1 point off. That doesn't really make sense of him being interested in someone who doesn't give a shit about him. So him being so tired from work goes home, almost gets run over by several cars, being so tired from work. Um, After about another 2 days of being at the office, uh, eventually goes home and realizes there are creatures munching on each other within his apartment building. He then runs for it, realizing that these monsters are then chasing him, physically running after him. He doesn't know why they're trying to eat him, but he knows that they basically ate everyone literally in front of his eyes. And eventually he realized that what these things are. After watching so many movies, he dubbed them zombies. Obviously, that's what they are, but he didn't believe that the zombie apocalypse would happen because it's basic fiction in his mind. But guess what? He's now in it. And he sees this plane goes down after an explosion, probably due to trying to fuel up real quick by taking off without properly checking the engines, and he explodes on takeoff or when it before it was about to land, whenever it is. The whole city goes into a disarray, explosions everywhere due to the zombie apocalypse. The whole world's going to shit, cops getting killed, And Akira Tendo sees this as one thing and one thing only: liberation. Because he never has to go back to work. So the world coming to an end, going to shit, is a good thing for him. Typically, it's not a good thing for anyone whatsoever at all, including him. But because he worked in a company that was so horrible and so terrible that there's nothing in life he could possibly see himself coming into contact in the near future that's as bad as working for so many hours to the point that you would want to commit seppuku. At least that's how he felt. That he's either going to die of exhaustion on his job, literally on the job, or he will kill himself one day by committing seppuku. Or is, wait a minute, harakiri? No, that's when your boss asks you to kill yourself, blah, blah, blah. No, yeah, he would ask someone to do a seppuku. Um, but, seppuku is about dishonoring and stuff, but how would that work? Either way, he liberates. Well, neither one will work. Seppuku or harakiri will work in this situation. I would say it's more like he would just commit suicide. That's all. Neither of those would work. Suicide. He would kill himself. That's all there is to it. Nothing honorable about it. I think he would just kill himself. So in this situation, he decides, okay, the world's gone to shit. I am now free. I am free of my boss. I'm free of my shitty life. I've now become free. I could go wherever I want. I could do whatever I want. This is the greatest day of all times. I'm going to be liberated. I never have to worry about being responsible for the bullshit of the job. I could work any job I want, the type of job I want, always wanted. I could work as many hours, even become tired working that job, but at least I'll be able to get enough sleep and be enjoying that job and be fulfilled. All these crazy stuff is going on inside his head, including explosions, galaxies, and it's like he's on drugs, but he hasn't taken any drugs. He should literally be collapsing on the floor, passed out from exhaustion, like literally passed out from exhaustion and not wake up at all until the very next day because he's so tired. But the moment he realized the world has gone to shit, all of a sudden he gets this burst of energy beyond that of a normal person who would have actually passed out, body who have given way. But because he's also played rugby in college, his body can withstand a certain amount of pressure, I'm only assuming. And because he's a certain young age, which he's probably in his early 20s, um, he could deal with the pressure up to a degree. And because his morale has been boosted, he's now liberated. He doesn't need drugs. Um, his the world coming to shit is his drugs. So that said, he's now imagining the blood that's on all these zombies as a colorful life, a colorful world, a sense of, it's like he's on drugs, seeing the blood and the gore and the disgust, not as blood, gore, and disgust, as a form uh, of freedom. That these aren't colors of horrors or of gore, like the green paint on the guy's head is not actually blood, or the yellow stuff coming out the guy's mouth is not actually saliva or any of that stuff from wanting to kill him and everything. Um, they're actually colors of liberation in his mind. And I love what the anime did with regards to this, that they use the colors not as a form of, well, he's on drugs, so he's seeing these colors, but the colors represent how he sees the world after being liberated. So it's not simply an artistic choice or to show a style of art like you would see in something like across the Spider Universe as Spider-Man. No, this is a clear representation of what he's visually seeing. So it's very different from that type of art style. So doing so, he goes after seeing Miss Hotori, which I don't know why he would go to try to see her. Um, but he went to see her to see if she was okay. Found the boss inside of her apartment. Took out his shitty boss in the very first episode. A lot happened in this very first episode, to be honest with you, and I'll say that right now. That's why it's so awesome. Tons of things to unpack in the very first episode. Took out the boss in the very first episode. Eventually, Miss Hotori has been infected by the zombie apocalypse and disease or whatever it is, and she starts to chase after him, try to bite him or to feed on him or brains or whatever it is, and he runs away. And this is the last time he'll ever see Miss Hotori, but who knows, because he doesn't really kill her. So maybe she'll pop up again throughout the end of the series. But he pieces out. He says his goodbye to his first crush, which he should have said goodbye the moment he found out that she was banging the boss. That should have been the end of his first crush, but that's why I said I dropped the game. I dropped this anime 1 point. It didn't make sense for him to go back there to see her after what had happened within the office. We then get to see him go into a supermarket the very next day to find goods because he's running out of supplies. Turn out the supplies he wanted is beer. He's having a good day and a good life. And he's not worried about things that are healthy for him. He's worrying about having fun. Now, in a typical situation, people will look at him, or anyone for that matter, will look at him like he's an idiot. Because he is an idiot. This is a zombie apocalypse. But in his mind, if you could put yourself in his mind, if you were working in the type of company he's working for, a zombie apocalypse wouldn't bother him at all. In fact, that this is just the type of thing that he would need to motivate himself to do great things in this zombie apocalypse. And that, I guess you could say, that's one of the reasons why he's the main protagonist of the story. He's a person that is able to liberate himself from that type of company and use that type of energy of liberation in order to save others along the way in this apocalypse. That's why this is the main protagonist of this story. His freedom with liberation from this company has given him the power to do things he wouldn't have done before. For instance, if he didn't work for this exploited company and his life was free, he wouldn't have probably had the energy he needed in order to do the things he did in the zombie apocalypse at all, because he wouldn't have that sense of liberation to look towards to do those things in such a dire times. So that's one of the reasons why I like this anime as well. So he goes into the supermarket, he meets this girl, and I think her name is, jeez, what's her name? Something Zuki. No. Um, Let me see, I wrote it down. Shizuka. That's her name. He meets a girl called Shizuka, and Shizuka is basically, she reminds me of, well, she doesn't really remind me of anybody, to be honest with you, uh, other than people in real life that I've seen actually wear outfits like this, workout outfits like this, and wear hoodies with workout outfits like this. So she reminds me of standard local girls that do weird stuff like this every now and again, um, but nothing from anime that I've actually seen. So he meets this girl in here, Shizuka, who is getting essential supplies for her survival while he's getting beer, and eventually she saves him from getting trampled on by a truck. And we'll get into her story later, but she leaves the facility. He goes out. He finds a motorcycle. He acquires the motorcycle from this alley he finds it on. He jumps over a zombie. It shows in perspective him jumping over a zombie in the shadows of the bike, in perspective jumping over the zombie, and the zombie looking up from its perspective of him jumping over. Another reason why I took a picture of this is because, once again, the aspect ratio as well as the type of angles and perspective of the shots are a good visual representation of the style of anime this is. There's a heavy focus with regards to perspective shots in this anime. It's not simply a scene cut to scene, wide shots, close shots, near shots, verticals, horizontal shots, pan in, pan out. It's not something as simple as that. There's a there's a huge emphasis with regards to angles and shots, and and when to apply a type of mood to a certain situations, or a type of happiness to a certain type of situation. For instance, if he's happy and he's about to jump off a building, um, what would be the best way to show him being happy jumping off the building? Well, the scene showed three different ways. It showed it from this horizontal angle, and then it showed it from a front angle, and then it showed it from an overhead angle, all while filming at the same time. Him running away, then the zoom in shot, then the transition shot, then the overhead shot. And all of these are a representation of the type of art style and the use of perspective with regards to the type of horror it is, which is zombie horror, which also use, if you know anything about zombie horrors, a lot of zombie horrors always use angular perspective shots. So this is a homage to those type of zombie horror films as well. So the very next day, or the same day, our boy Akira gets on the radio to hear if other people have been listening on radio as well, or transmitting information on the radio with regards to what's going on in the world. He found out that no one's online, but staying home, or oh, actually no, that's not Akira. No, 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 no. The picture of the dog in the frame is the picture of Shizuka's dog. So this isn't Akira's. So now the scene that we see here is, I believe, might be episode 2 or episode 3, where the story is now showing the point of view of Shizuka, the girl he met in the convenience store. And this is her dog that she found when she was a kid. Um, or that he had when she was a kid, and she's listening on the radio to see if there's survivors out there. And it shows the various survival books that she's been reading with regards to surviving in any type of situation. And it shows that the type of character that she is a survivalist type. And she's been doing her homework, and homework as is, she's watching a lot of movies, read a lot of books, went online, listened on radios, thinking about certain supplies. And one of the things she saw online, or should I say on her television set, is an image of a man saying, I'll make it, I'll make it, I'll make it. And then all of a sudden he makes it. And at the end, he has this big smile on his face and said, I finally made it. I finally made it out of that hell. And then in that very next instant, he's bitten on the shoulder. Um, so I should point out the fact that when he was crying and said, I made it, the cries aren't from the cries of being bitten. The cries are from the cries of him being happy and saying, yeah, I made it, I made it. And when he's screaming out, is the screaming out of saying, yeah, I've made it. But then the next shot shows the zombie bite him on the shoulder directly after. So it's kind of like, it's a very strange and bizarre way of doing two things at once. His mood and his happy mood is an aggressive and happy, smiling mood, but at the same time, it's an aggressive, painful looking mood. So it would fool if you didn't understand the context of what's being presented, you would assume that he's crying from being bitten, but that's not the case. Those are tears of joy until he gets bitten on the shoulder. Turns out that it was a movie, or it was a series. I believe it was a movie that Shizuka was watching. So there's now a confirmation that the gentleman that was running away in that video that Akira Tendo was watching at the first episode in the very introduction of Zom 100 was a movie. So it's I'm thankful that that has been explained later on in the anime that it was a movie that he was watching the whole time. Was it reality that he was watching while the zombie apocalypse was actually happening, or was it a movie he was watching and there was no zombie apocalypse? So a zombie apocalypse was actually happening while he was watching a movie about a zombie apocalypse. But the anime did this great job of not telling you which one it was. So that's another reason why this is the number one anime in October of 2023, with regards to everything, including the direction, because of how they did the anime, not just the art style and the story. Moving forward from that, we get to see the backstory with regards to how Shizuka got into the convenience store and how she saved Akira's life. So each character has their small backstory, but it's not like backstory like Rurouni Kenshin backstory or backstory like um, uh, Naruto backstory, which are ridiculous. They're very extremely short ones, straight to the point. So moving on from that, we get to see another character as we progress forward, and this is Kensho, Akira Tendo's friend from college, who's the real estate agent. Turns out this guy's like the playboy type. On a good day or on a great day, what he does for fun is he goes to, a strip club or a bondage room, and he has some kinky fun. Turns out on this day when he was having not such a good day, he went to this place to. Actually, it might be the total opposite. He might actually go to a place like this when he's depressed, which is kind of messed up because typically you would think that, you know, when people want to have fun, at least some adults, when they have fun, they go towards things like this for a sense of relief and enjoyment from a hard day's work. But I I believe in his case is he went to this place because he was depressed, which is not which is kind of the same. It's kind of the same. I don't really believe people go to these places because, they want a sense of relief from hard days work because they're happy. It's more like because they're depressed and they want something to make them feel alive. And these are like the extreme versions of these things, very extreme. But why he wants this type of enjoyment is I don't know why. But he's basically the anime is making fun of his type of behavior and his type of character, as well as adding the sense of adult humor to the situation. He basically says his drunk ass decide to get locked up in a bondage room when the zombie apocalypse happened. And this girl apparently was bitten before she even turned. So he had to force her um, onto this like rack and chain her there using the bondage stuff. So he's trapped in this room with the girl because, well, just to be completely clear, there's only one exit. Apparently, there's no windows for him to jump out of, and the only exit is the door for which he came in, for which he has the zombie girl attached to the door, blocking it using the handcuffs. So yeah, that said, he's trapped in there, and he has been trapped in there for days, I believe, maybe like 2 or 3 days. It's been 3 days or something like that, and he hasn't had any food. So moving on from that, we get to see another character that's trapped in this zombie apocalypse. A blonde haired guy who's part of like a men's club thing or men's hostess club, and he goes to try to help a girl that he found inside of his club, and he gets bitten. But the story doesn't tell who this character is. And for the next couple of episodes, it doesn't tell who this character is. So for the life of me, I don't know why this character was introduced early into the anime if it doesn't explain who he is. For like a full 4 animes in, after I believe this was episode 3, this character was never talked about Yet, Kensho, I believe, was introduced in episode 3. So after episode 3, all the way up to episode 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, all the way to episode 8, this character was never focused on. So for a full 4 episodes after, nothing was mentioned of this character, which is bizarre to me. Why introduce this character? So even though I dropped the anime at one point, I was still fascinated to see who his character is, and I believe he has some type of relevance that will pop up later on. But moving forward from that, Akira then meets up with Kensho, um, apologized for previous meeting that they had together where they were upset at each other over each other's job. They both escape the facility. Akira jumps from one building over to the next because he has so much energy due to his shitty job. He could literally like do ridiculous things that he wouldn't be able to do before if he didn't have that type of energy. Unfortunately for him, Tendo doesn't fall into that same category, even though Tendo is more physically fit than he is. He doesn't have that type of energy Akira does. He jumps over. Um, why he took off his clothes completely, I don't know. But he basically jumped over and took off his clothes to say he's going to liberate himself from the type of life he had before, and stripping completely butt naked is an example of this. However, I would say, and they both strip thereafter, um, because this is a camaraderie thing that they did when they were in college, as the show of their type of humor from when they were both in college. You know, they would strip butt naked just to make fun of their coach and stuff, you know, and piss off their coach. It was the thing that they did. It's kind of weird, but it was a thing that they used to do um, to annoy their coach. So it's not like it's a gay thing or anything like that, or they're not weird for each other like that. It's just some type of brotherly camaraderie thing, and I believe it's a thing in Japanese cultures anyway, because men go into like bathhouses and they get butt naked in these huge tubs together. So it's a thing that goes from child to adulthood, as typically found in Japanese culture anyway. So moving on from that, I would say, oh yeah, I would say with regards to this, this is the second point I dropped with regards to this anime that's kind of weird and kind of pissed me off. This guy started to become cringe because in every single episode after his first introduction, he's always getting naked for no reason other than to have some type of appeal to maybe the ladies or to the fellas. I don't judge. Also, a reference from Dean Winchester of Supernatural. Um, I just used that because it just came to my mind because that's what he said in that series. Um, because it does make sense. But it doesn't make sense why in every anime episode moving forward he's always naked. It doesn't make sense. I know it's part of his character to make him that person, but there's no real reason for him to do it all the time. Now, just to bring reason with regards to points that I've dropped, uh, in total I've only dropped like 4 points with regards to this anime in comparison to Make My Day, which I dropped 7, which I didn't say before in Make My Day, but I dropped 7. And in Make My Day, I dropped 7 with regards to what happened in the story is um, the Doc Roberts, with regards to Captain Bark and his relations to the other characters. Why didn't just kick his ass and throw him out? Um, because he caused a lot of problems and all the way through, and in relations to how certain story elements didn't make sense, and how the main protagonist was kind of a dumbass at the same time, um, especially when it came to saving people and uh, and making certain decisions, and also the swarm themselves. Um, I thought that the type of creatures that should have been used should have been something more than just like giant-sized maggots. They should have evolved into something else. Those giant kaijus, I don't know if that's what they evolve into, but uh, I didn't mind a swarm. I just thought that there would be more to them than just to be floating things. And there are several other little nitpicks with regards to that anime, but trust me, there were um, other animes that had a hell of a lot more drop regards to things that I thought were cringe and didn't make sense, and I couldn't go past the second episode of those animes. That's why Make My Day and Was on 100 is in my top two for October 2023, Spookytober. So moving on, and since I've just said there's only a maximum of 4 within this anime, from episode 1 to episode 8 that I didn't like. The second being that of this guy being naked all the time. So the next scene, we see them coming to a place where they meet a bunch of flight attendants, and they're all stuck into this department place, trying to survive. They lock the doors, but they can't escape. Eventually, zombies get in. The flight attendants all die. The guy with glasses die, and Akira and Tensho escape. Tensho says, "I'm going to leave my old life behind," and he eventually changed his hair to blonde because he wants to be liberated from the type of real estate job that he did. We finally get to learn that in the previous episode, before he jumped over uh, from building to building butt naked, that he was basically scamming people for his company and his real estate agent. So he was also doing the work of, exploitive company who did very bad things in order to get him to do the labor. So he hated his job, and he eventually didn't drop his job completely, but he was about to quit. That's why when he met Akira before and was at a bar with Akira and they had a big argument, he was telling him that Akira should quit his exploitive company, his scam company, because he was about to quit his, because his was also a bad company. So moving on from that, we get to see Kensho and Akira go into a type of museum location, aquarium, should I be specific, aquarium, and found that a shark has eaten a lot of the scuba divers who were taking care of him because the shark got infected. So now we have zombie sharks, and turns out that at this location, at this, I believe it's a theme park, aquarium theme park, um, or like a water world or something like that. Um, he goes and put on this aquatic suit for him to not get bitten by zombies, because this suit apparently can make him, swim underwater, but at the same time can make him resist bites from not from really from sharks, but from sharp teeth creatures. I believe the anime stated. Um, so hopefully is able to stop zombie bites, and it did to a certain degree, but the pain is still there. So eventually he put on the suit, played the whole superhero part that he always wanted to play, and he meets Shizuka again. She drops the whole knowledge of why she won't join them, because they're not really thinking of the bigger picture. And eventually the giant shark escape, the zombie shark escape, and goes after Shizuka. And you wonder how a shark that would require water to traverse would escape from a water tank and come after someone on land. It's because the people it ate were zombies that fell into the water. The shark ate the zombie people, and eventually the blood from the zombie people infected the shark to make the shark a zombie shark. That's how the zombie shark became a zombie shark. People got infected first, then it got infected, and eventually the legs of the zombie um, mutated, and or should I say, the legs of the zombie um, mutated to a certain degree and went straight through the shark. Or maybe the zombies that it the shark started to eat the shark from the insides. It doesn't really make sense, but the shark eventually grew, or the legs from the zombie it ate eventually came out from the bottom of the shark, and that's how it was able to run on land. It had zombie feet from the different zombies it ate. It goes after Shizuka. Akira takes out the shark, and the next scene we see after that happens, Tensho is thinking about organization with regards to the different canned foods he have to sort, and water bottles and all the stuff he have to sort with regards to survival batteries, so on and so forth, the whole 9 yards on their travels. Otherwise, they'll if they get to a place where they're stranded, they'll be screwed. Um, Akira thinks the same thing too. And then we get more of him going naked in the following episode. I don't understand the whole naked thing or the appeal to it. It doesn't make sense to have him do it all the time. That's one of the things. Yeah, so the whole Miss Hotori thing is one. This dude's getting naked is another. And possibly the guy, the blonde hair hostess guy, um, who doesn't show up, not even 4 episodes past this. Why they would show him early doesn't really make sense. So those are the three. I believe before the end of this video there was a fourth that I found. Maybe I'm mistaken. So moving on from that, Shizuka then goes towards her iPad to look up to see how different ways of solving a way to find a cure for the zombie apocalypse disease. If it actually is a disease that was transmuted, she's trying to think of ways in order to save humanity through a vaccine and through different people who've come up with ideas for vaccine, or at least an idea to a solution to delay the virus within people. So moving on from that, we then see our boy Akira meet up with his old boss at his job, Kosugi. Kosugi, at least that's his name, Coach Kosugi. In this situation, he's the coach of a boys' baseball team, not like a kids' baseball team, but like a teenage boys' baseball team or young adult boys' baseball team. And it turns out that he's their diehard coach, and he's one of the few people that survived. And he trapped Akira and his friends by spiking their tires so they could steal their resources. Eventually, he forced Akira to start to work for him again, like he was back in the office. Akira gets deja vu again and started to think that he cannot survive without the help of his boss. So basically, it's brainwashing, corporate brainwashing of don't you don't need to think for yourself. I'll do all the thinking for you. You just need to work. And as long as you work under me, you'll be nice and safe. So that's basically the bullshit that he's giving to Akira. So that said, Shizuka then interrupts and tells Akira, fine, we'll leave you here if you want to be part of this guy's little crew, since you want to survive. But the Akira I know isn't this type of person to just give up this lightly. Eventually, she got to him and realized that she broke through to his little consciousness to realize everything he's been fighting for to get liberated, he's just gonna go back to. He sees that as something as very bleak because the world is not the same the way the world is, and you can't really go back to the way the world was. So once he comes to realize this, he then says goodbye to his boss. He ends up saving the guy from zombies that end up getting into the facility and leaves him there. So everyone that was with the boss, including the baseball players, eventually abandons him because they know that he was basically using them to begin with. It's weird that they all knew that he was using him. It's like they never had the gusto in order to stand up to him to escape or to leave, because they were nothing but lackeys and they were all about following rules to survive. It's like they couldn't think for themselves because they can't think for themselves, because they've never been liberated from that type of work locations. These are people who all about following rules and regulations to survive. So they need someone to look towards to help them to move forward until they got to the point where they're under grueling work conditions and they need to find someone else to latch on to. So the people that eventually left Kosugi aren't no good than the people who were working in the office when Akira was there. They only abandoned Kosugi because they realized they need to go with someone who's willing to offer them something, the better form of the worst version of what they're getting. So moving on from that, we get to see the fourth character with regards to this story, which is I believe, the last of the crew in this anime. There are four crew members of this anime. There's Akira, there's Kensho, there's Shizuka, and then there's Beatrice. And this is Beatrice, and she's a wheeling samurai, um, wheeling ancient samurai, either Muromachi or Edo gear, medieval armor. And she's really into sushi, and she's really into Japanese history, more than some Japanese people. And she's only here because she traveled from Germany to this location because she heard of the history of Japan sushi making, and she's really into sushi making and sushi chefs. So she and tons of other people went to look for food in order to support their survival. But one of her main priorities was to get enough sushi because she's a die-hard sushi fan. So the whole objective here is to get enough sushi to this famous sushi chef and make sushi for Beatrix so she could survive. Um, but it's not really so she could survive. It's more like so she could enjoy what she loves. Where Akira loves a good beer and good food and ramen, she likes good sushi. So each of these individuals, including Shizuka, have their little food quirks or their little personal quirks that make them unique individuals. And that's another thing I like with regards to this anime. So I was completely wrong. There was only three things that dropped with regards to this anime from episode 1 all the way to episode 8. And I believe the next episode, the final episode, after Beatrix is taken to a hot springs, one of Japan's famous hot springs, and realizing that they can't stay at the hot springs because everyone at the hot springs are infected zombies, um, they start to cry and get upset, and it's another very humorous zombie moment and very funny moment in total, thinking that they're going to have a nice little hot bath, not thinking that most people go there for relax, and most of those people would be eventually zombies, and all the zombies that were there were actually in the water. Um, I would say this is strange though. They all popped out of the water in their robes. So can zombies really be underwater for that long and stay underwater? Wouldn't they drown? I mean, I know that they're dead and the brain is not functioning, but at least some portion of the brain is functioning. So the ones that popped out of the water, that doesn't really make much sense. But this is an anime, so everything's not supposed to make sense. So I'm going with that. So technically, there were only three things that I found wrong with this. The next episode, which was, I believe, the eighth or the ninth episode, was when he goes back to meet his father in his old hometown after his father and his mother locked off the farmhouse and locked off the town that they lived in from the zombie apocalypse. And he has a nice little reunion with his mom and pops, and his friends get to have some resolutions as well. But I'm not going to get into that because that is the end of this video with regards to Zom 100 and Make My Day. I tried to get through all of them as fast as I can, as much as I can, and stated this rundown as specifically and as enjoyable as I possibly can. So, what I think with regards to this anime, will this anime stand the test of times? Maybe Make My Day won't stand the test of times and have a season 2 or a season 3. I believe Make My Day is simply a one-shotter, possible one-shotter, and they might not continue that story ever again. It was just probably a moment in time that they had to sell a story in a series format rather than a film. But I do believe Zom 100 might see more than 2 seasons. Um, at bare minimum, I believe Zom 100 might make it to its 4th or its 5th season. I could see it making it to its 5th season. But it would have to do a hell of a lot more than what it's doing right now in order for it to get past its 2nd season. I know they could successfully do a 2nd season easily because the 1st season is very good, done very good. But it's hard for second season to follow up with its 1st season if the 1st season was very good and what's expected of the 2nd season has to be even better. So how would you make it even better once the apocalypse already hit? The main selling factor towards Zom 100 was the scammy company. That's what made the anime appealing, and that was a hook. And that's what sold the anime all the way to the point until the apocalypse broke out. So what type of hook would the 2nd season bring if they already done the scammy company? It has to be something that's greater than the scammy company in order for this to survive. I believe at most it could have 5 seasons if done well. At minimum, it might have 3 seasons. If the 2nd season doesn't do good, they might try to pick it up in the 3rd season. And if the 3rd season doesn't do good, it'll fail and they'll never make another one. But I believe the 2nd season might actually do good. So in all obviousness, they'll make a 3rd season. So I could see this going beyond 1 season easily. So that's why it's also my #1 anime series for October 2023. Not only did it come out October 2023, but it was done better than most of the animes for October 2023, and it was a movie, and it's a successful manga series. So yes, that's it for this video of Spookytober. For November and for December, there's going to be a combination of both November and December combined, and that's going to be both anime and manga combined. I've never done one before, but it's November and December. November's not going to have an anime. It's going to be done in December. So for the month of December, before Christmas, I'm going to have both an anime and a manga combined video, which means the screen caps are going to be from both 2 anime shows and 2 manga series, because I haven't done a manga in a while and I need to do another manga. I haven't done a manga for the previous month and the month before that or the month before that. So I need to do another manga. So come December 2023, since none is going to be made in November, it's going to be a combination of both anime and manga. So look out for that when December come around before Christmas. That's it for this video. I'm done for today. Probably hop on Resident Evil 7 Monday, latest, because that's what I said I was going to do. Next week, Monday, before Halloween, and I think Halloween falls on Tuesday. I'm going to, on Monday, either on Sunday or Monday. It's either Sunday or Monday, I'm going to hop on Resident Evil. It'll probably be Sunday, because I want to get at least a good 2 days, but if not, Monday, Resident Evil 7.